Welcome to the English with Kirsty podcast from www.englishwithkirsty.com. Here I'll be sharing with you tips, information and other learning resources so that you can improve your business English. Hi and welcome back to the English with Kirsty podcast. Today I have another interview episode for you. I'm looking forward to this conversation. And today it's with another podcaster, Anja. I met her on LinkedIn and what a surprise because that's where I'm meeting most of my guests lately. But hi, Anja, welcome to the podcast. Maybe you could start by telling us a bit about yourself and your podcast too.
Hi, Kirsty. And first of all, thank you for inviting me. This is very exciting, and I'm happy to talk about all things podcasting. So since we're talking about that bit of my business, I will tell you a funny story, which is my procrastination story. So I started listening to podcasts actually maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and I fell in love with the medium itself. And at first, I didn't really have the idea of launching my own, but it kind of started growing in me a couple of years in while I was listening to other people's podcasts. And then in 2021, I approached my colleague from Croatia, my colleague who is also a translator, and he hosted a language-based podcast in Croatian. And I invited him to, I actually wanted to find out some tips and tricks, what I can do to launch my own podcast, the technical aspect, and so on. And he actually invited me to be a part of his podcast. So long story short, we were co-hosts for 2 years on his podcast.
Okay.
So that's my procrastination journey, because I was still at the time kind of scared to launch my own, the regular imposter syndrome stuff that kicks in when you have a new idea. So we were co-hosts for 2 years. And then I finally, last year in October 2023, finally decided to launch my own podcast, which has nothing to do with language. It is called Freelance Business Unlocked, and it is about all things business. Because as I said, 6 or 7 years ago, I mostly gravitated towards business topics, freelancing topics. And it's something that I learned a lot from, and I found fascinating. And I kept listening to that type of content for years and for hours each week. So I wanted to do my own spin and try it out, interview other people, share my own experiences. And it's been one of the best business decisions I've made so far.
Yeah, because I think that's something like if you already like the medium, I really enjoyed listening to podcasts before I started mine, mainly for language learning, but also, for content and to have something to do on my long commutes. I had 3 hours of train travel in the past, so
Wow.
I needed to use that time well. But it helped me so much with language learning, and I thought, yeah, that would be a good thing to do. But your way is also good because you got to learn, I guess, some of the lessons from being a co-host. You already had some experience and maybe you had some ideas about decisions, how you want to do things for your podcast, what went well, what you might want to try differently. So that's a good way to get an introduction, to be on someone else's podcast or to co-host with them. And I think as freelancers or as business owners, there's so much we can learn from each other. There's loads of content out there, but some of the best advice I've heard is just spending time with other people who are in the same position and what's their journey, what have they learned. I'm spending a lot more time with translators at the moment, and I'm not a translator, but some of the topics are relevant across more than one industry. I mean, I guess language courses are kind of connected to the language industry in a way, but it's really important to learn from other people and how they've solved problems. So speaking of language, what's your story then with languages and the role that they've played in your life, how you became interested in translating? What's the story there?
That's a very fun question because I haven't thought of it for a long time. But my story with particularly the English language started very early on. And one of the earliest memories I have with learning English or acquiring English has to do with Cartoon Network.
Okay, you're
Because
not the first person who said that on the podcast.
because I used to watch those cartoons regularly. I wouldn't even let my parents watch the news. I would tell them, keep the cartoons on. I want to watch them. I was obsessed and I loved them so much. And now I kind of low-key miss that period of my life. And I remember my dad telling me how I try to imitate those characters. I tried to imitate their accents and what they were saying. I would ask him, what does this mean? And then repeat back the entire sentence in English. And we have to bear in mind, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years old. I'm not sure. So that's my earliest memory of learning English. And then when I started elementary school, English was just a part of the regular curriculum as well as in high school. But along with those traditional English classes at school, I also attended a private language school, which I'm really happy about. And I know that's a luxury and not everyone can afford to do that. But I took private English classes outside of school, which were held a couple of times a week. And I studied English and Italian that way for, I don't know, throughout my entire elementary school and high school. So yeah, languages were kind of a natural choice for me when I started university. But my first choice at the time, I was 18, was dentistry, which is
Okay,
interesting.
that's an unusual path.
Yeah. And since those groups at university are really small, they enroll, I don't know, 30 or 40 students max each year. So I did manage to get in, and I was looking for, okay, what's my plan B? Languages have been part of my life, and it makes sense to try them out. So it wasn't actually my first choice, but I stuck with it. I liked it. And I feel like my university days went by really quickly, and none of the exams were particularly difficult. I wasn't struggling with any of the exams. Of course, I studied, I practiced, I did my best, but it kind of felt natural. So I studied English and Italian at university.
And then when you carried on to become a translator, do you do both? So English and Italian into Croatian, or?
Yeah, that's true. Then after university, I started looking for full-time jobs, and I went through 2 translation agencies, but those were short-lived, my experiences over there. So I spent a total of 1.5 years, whopping 18 months in other people's businesses. And then I decided to start my own business in 2020. So yeah, I've been self-employed for a few years now, but I've been iterating my business recently. I've been introducing some new things and putting the free in freelancing.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. I think that's one of the really good things about having your own business. You can be doing something and then decide, I want to add something, I want to stop doing something, I want to try something out. I think it's a freedom that you don't have when you work for someone else. And I'm just kind of exploring that at the moment, looking at new directions and how I can serve my audience better, and what's going to be the most useful thing that I can do. And some of it I kind of planned at the beginning of the year, some of it is completely new, so it's an adventure, and I think it's good to enjoy that adventure and also have people to share the adventure with, because we're all on that kind of journey in a way, because things are changing in terms of the market, in terms of what's happening around us, and we need to change with it, to keep things fresh and
Yeah.
productive and exciting. But
And
I
you know,
think,
the thing
yeah.
is, I'm sorry to jump in. I just wanted to quickly mention that some people take those patterns they have when they were, say, self-employed into their freelancing life, and those rules do not apply. We need to be more flexible. We need to be more brave, adventurous, and try out different things, as you said. So we need to create new patterns, new way of life and of doing business when we venture out on our own.
Don't wait for someone to give you permission, because there is no one to give you permission.
Yeah.
You're working, it's your story. It's up to you what you're going to do. And yeah, some things won't work, but then you know that they don't work, or they don't work in that way, and then it's an opportunity to try something else. But I think it's really good, going back to what you just said about learning English. It's something that we in England don't tend to do very well, but other European countries do. That they start early, much earlier. I think my first additional language classes were when I was 11, and that's late.
Yeah.
And so it's really good when people are introduced to other languages earlier, because I do think it helps. It's not too late. I started a new language last year. It's never too late, but
Yeah.
it definitely helps.
That's exactly what I wanted to say. It's never too late, and you're still very young at 11. But now that you're a teacher, and now that you know how beneficial it is to start early, of course, you would have been more proficient faster had you started at the age of, I don't know, 3 in kindergarten, right?
Driving my grandparents crazy because they didn't speak additional languages. They tried to help me when I was I was at school, but they had no idea when because that wasn't part of their curriculum, or maybe French was, but many years ago. And then but
yeah,
I'm the only one in my family who's interested in this way. But I think it's I don't see it as my job. It's also my hobby and the way I communicate with my friends. So you kind of build it into your life. Like with you, even with the cartoons, you found something you enjoyed, and then it didn't feel like a chore anymore.
Yeah.
And how is that in Croatia? Did they have with the cartoons, do they have subtitles in English or in Croatian, or how did that work? Were there any subtitles?
I don't remember the subtitles actually, but I know that there was no dubbing, which I'm really happy about, because it would have been much more difficult to learn English in a different way other than cartoons. So there was no dubbing, and I was listening to those characters in English, but to be completely honest, I don't remember if there were any subtitles. There probably were for older children, but I wasn't able to read back then. Yeah.
Oh, I think that's cool. So English has always been like a part of your life from this very early age, and we wanted to talk a bit about content and content creation. So going back to your podcast, so originally the podcast wasn't in English, and then you decided to make some changes to the podcast and to then produce episodes in English. What was the thinking behind that? Why did you decide to make that change?
Well, my answer to that question is twofold. So remember my procrastination journey. Now I have my imposter syndrome journey. So the podcast is the true indicator of the evolution I've been through. So I first started recording in Croatian because that's my native language. That's my first language. And I felt more comfortable speaking in Croatian, even though I've been studying English for as long as I can remember, but still I felt this kind of, I don't know, I was holding myself back. I don't know. That's probably the best way to describe it. So I started in Croatian, and I even recorded, I don't know, about 10 solo episodes, I think, and there were a couple of interview episodes in Croatian. So the first 15 of those are in Croatian. So it took me approximately 4 months because they go out on a weekly basis. So it took me 4 months to get over that mental hurdle and start posting finally in English. Because another reason for that is I've been receiving messages congratulations on the podcast. And I'm so sorry I can't listen to it because I don't speak Croatian. And I wanted to open this podcast, this platform to as many people as possible, and to invite virtually anyone to the podcast. So once you open yourself up to the English language, then the whole world is your oyster. And I said my answer to your question is twofold. So it's the imposter syndrome. And another reason was for me switching to English was to expand this audience, the listenership, and the potential guests. So yeah, it was a journey, and some may think that the podcast is 3-5 years old, but it's actually not even a year old. And I feel like I went through so many changes, but that's what happens when you take action. I couldn't have done all of this had I procrastinated even more. So yeah, that's a lesson in and of itself.
Yeah, I thought the podcast was older actually. I started listening to it. I thought you've been doing it for longer. So that's credit to you, because people have that impression. They don't think, oh, she's just a beginner. But if you
Thank you.
if you think back to that time, so you had the imposter syndrome, you were procrastinating a bit. And so what helped you to finally say, right, okay, today the first episode in English is going out, I'm going to do it? What helped you to make that decision to do it?
Well, I received external validation and encouragement from people from the outside, from those English-speaking people, or people from other countries who speak and or understand English. So that was one thing. And another thing I like to do in those situations is think of the worst case scenario. But when you actually think about it, what is the worst thing that could happen if I start publishing interview episodes in English? Virtually nothing.
No.
I can't think of a scenario that would make me want to stop doing the thing. So I realized that I wanted to do that. That kind of wish was stronger than the imposter syndrome at that moment. And I realized how many more opportunities I could get if I get out of my comfort zone and if I finally step out and do the thing. And I have to say, after a couple of episodes, that fear of hitting publish went away. Sometimes I would schedule an episode, and my episodes go out every Tuesday at 5 a.m. Central European time. And I always schedule them at the same time. And I sometimes wake up on Tuesdays and literally forget that I published an episode. So I have to remind myself, okay, now you have to promote it. I receive emails that the episode has been imported on the website. And then I'm like, oh yeah, the episode went live. I did a good job of scheduling it. But it's no longer a mental burden. It's something that's routine, that's normal. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned. It is so liberating to finally do something you've been wanting to do for months or years, and then have it become routine. It's so nice.
Because that normalizes it. I think that works with with other things as well. Like if I don't know, if speaking another language, like with my Romanian, when I think about when I was like really nervous about speaking it, and then now recently a potential customer asked me, okay, will you say you speak Romanian? Let's speak Romanian. Then I was like, okay, fine. It's not perfect, but it's become normal that I do it. And I think that the same applies to bigger things as well, like public speaking or creating content in another language. Once you normalize it, even hearing yourself speaking another language is once it feels normal, some of that anxiety or stress that's associated with it does go away, because oh yeah, I do this on Tuesdays. This is normal for me now.
Yeah, that's spot on. And another thing, now that you mentioned the voice, or listening to your own voice, or speaking in a different language, you get used to that part too, because I haven't met a person who said, I like my voice. I think I have a really good voice. We all hate listening back to our own recordings, but you you get used to it fairly quickly, and you look past the voice quality or whatever you've been given. That's it. You can't change it. You look for other things. You start looking for fillers and things you might improve upon in your language or in your interviewing style and in your questions. So those are the things that make the content good. And your voice is just your voice. It's okay.
Yeah, and there are things that if you don't like with me, if I listen to myself speaking Romanian, or even my Portuguese teacher said, okay, record your answer to this. Like, don't write a text. You can write a text, but then you have to read it. I was, oh no, I hate that. But it's not so much that I hate my voice. I hate how it sounds. It's like a bit hesitant. It's not with the confidence that I would usually speak with, because I'm thinking, oh, is this right? Is this okay? But those kind of things will also disappear the more that you do it, the more you feel confident, the more you sound confident. So some of these things, I think sometimes people don't dislike their voice as much, but when they hear it in another language, if it's a bit quieter or hesitant or shy, or these things can be a problem. But these things are not forever. Like, you have your voice, that's going to be with you, but some things about the way you sound are things that you can change. And if you don't like them, then work on them. It doesn't have to be something that you're stuck with forever.
Yes, spot on.
So now, who would you say that your audience is? Who is the podcast aimed at? Who can you help through the podcast?
The podcast is aimed at freelance business owners and small business owners. So solopreneurs, basically, who want to work on their business, who want to learn something new, who want to learn some new insights and ideas from people who work in various industries. So that is my goal always, to learn from other people, not only colleagues inside of our industry, because as you know, we're often inside our industry bubble, listening to the same people, listening to the same tips and ideas, but we can learn from other professionals as well. And it is something I've been learning while listening to other people's podcasts before I launched my own. And now I'm doing that directly one-on-one with guests whom I handpick or who reach out to me. So it's actually a great feeling having a platform where you have all the creative control. And it's a double-edged sword that in podcasting, there is no algorithm. I think it comes with pros and cons. So when it comes to pros, it's dependent upon your marketing efforts. So you have to do the marketing, and it's hard work, regardless of what anyone says. It's hard work. And the con is that there is no algorithm pushing your podcast to people. They have to deliberately find it, or find it through your social media channels. So yeah, it's still a work in progress, and it's a slow burn. And I know it will take quite some time to get to thousands or tens of thousands of listeners, but I was ready for that from day one. So especially since I didn't launch it in English initially, I know that it will take some time for it to gain traction, but people need to know that from the get-go.
Yeah, it's not like one of these, oh, you'll have thousands of subscribers by the next day. Sometimes people are looking for quick wins, quick results, but they're not always the right people as well. I think sometimes building an audience more slowly also means that you get the right people as well, because there isn't so much hype. Maybe, I mean, I want a really big audience too. That would be fantastic. But I think it's also important. I love stats. I look at my stats for whatever, for the podcast, for LinkedIn, whatever. I'm aware of them, but also aware that sometimes people will just say, oh, I saw your content, or I listened to your podcast episode, and you had no idea that they were doing that. They were one of however many listened to it that day. But the right people finding the right people is more important than having more And I think that's something that we can do when we're talking about something like having a freelance business. It's something very relatable. It's a topic that brings people together, because if you're doing that, you know what it's like, and you have points that you can make about the topic, and you can relate to other people. And I guess also I find as a podcast host that having a podcast means you can talk to people that you would never approach normally, like, hi, come and talk to me. But if you invite them on a podcast, then you can have some amazing conversations with people that maybe you wouldn't approach otherwise, and then you can share that with your audience too, of course. But it's a privilege to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's another great point you made here, and it's one of the reasons why I launched it and why I wanted to invite people on, because if you have a platform, you're much more likely to get those guests on, because it serves them as well. But we've all heard of those pick my brain sessions, and there's a time and place for those, but people who are kind of more successful traditionally, or higher up, or C-suite, they probably will not say yes to a 2-hour lunch with you who is just starting out, or who is a couple of years into their business. So having a platform provides a great way to connect with those people, and not only interview them, but foster meaningful connections with them, relationships. I often send DMs, or my guests send me DMs long after our interview, because we formed a sort of a relationship, a business relationship. So it's also another bonus.
Yeah, me too. It's like another form of networking, isn't it? And also you can be introduced to new audiences, but also they're on your radar, you're on theirs. So if you come across an opportunity that might be interesting for them, or the other way around, it's a way to keep the business relationship going, and also a way to help each other. And I think that's important as well. Someone's given their time for you, and you can help to promote them, but it's also about looking at what can happen in the future. And that's why I think it's good to have guests that make sense as well, for your podcast, for your listeners. And I think I've seen different models. I mean, English with Kirsty is only in English because, well, the name, but I have a very international audience. But I also know some podcasts that are in multiple languages, depending on who the guest is, what they want to speak. And I think that can work really well as well, to have podcasts in different languages on the same feed. Would you ever do content in Croatian again, or are you happy with just English? Or how do you feel about having a mix of languages? Or
at the moment, I'm happy with English, and I like to say never, because you actually never know. But this, as I already said, this podcast in its English iteration has opened up many new relationships and opportunities. So I believe I will stick with it for a long time, because it makes sense for me and my business. But I have to say, I have a lot of connections on LinkedIn who are from Croatia and who create content exclusively in Croatian, and I love to see that as well. But having a podcast in Croatian, as we spoke off camera, does not stop me from interviewing people who are from Croatia. And I've actually done that multiple times, and I have some of them planned for fall, which is great. So it actually serves as an introduction of Croatian people to the rest of the world, or whoever is interested in the podcast. So yeah, there is actually, I see no cons, but it makes more sense for me right now.
Okay, and so just a couple of final questions. The first one is, what advice would you give to people who haven't quite made this step yet? They want to create some content in English, whether that's a podcast, English like as an additional language, whether that's a podcast or video content, or I don't know, anything, but they haven't done it yet because they're thinking, oh, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to take this step? What would you advise them to do?
Well, if you've already been creating content in your second language, whether it be English or a different language, then you've already dipped your toe into content creation in a different language that is your non-native one, which means that podcasting or video content is just another step above that text-based content. So it's not that simple. It's actually, it is simple, but it's not easy. You need to get over this imposter syndrome yourself. No one is going to do that for you, which is good news and bad news. And I don't know how I could help others with a single sentence or with a click of a button. I wish I could do that. But people need to realize that others are waiting for them to post something, to launch a podcast or a YouTube channel. They're waiting for a creator with their voice. And it is difficult to imagine ourselves in that position. How am I supposed to be that voice for other people? Why is someone going to tune into my content when I have nothing to say, or I feel like I haven't got enough experience? But you do. You're always a couple of steps ahead of someone else. And you always have a certain portion of the audience who is going to truly enjoy what you do and what you create. And you will start getting those comments and replies and feedback in a couple of months. If we're talking about podcasting, as you said, it doesn't happen in a week or in a month. It will happen in a couple of months, and that will be your validation that you're doing something right. And you just have to do it, schedule it, put some time, put it on your calendar, and do it and walk away. If you need to, you can schedule it and walk away, which is what I did. Because hitting publish and then waiting for people to start commenting or responding, it's very nerve-wracking. So if you need to, put some time on your calendar and keep yourself accountable to other people. Let your friends know. Let 3 or 4 of your colleagues know, I'm doing this thing, because you increase the chances of actually doing the thing once you do that.
Yeah, you're accountable because you've said it. You said it's going to happen, and then it makes it real in a way. It's not just an idea in your head. And that can be the first step. Tell someone about this plan that you have, and then it feels a lot more real.
Yeah.
And tell someone who will share your enthusiasm. Don't tell someone who's going to say, oh, that's a terrible idea. Do you want to do that?
Exactly.
Find someone who really, encourage you and support you.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. Share it with someone whom you trust and who is going to share the enthusiasm with you. That's true.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons I brought you on as well, because you were saying about what do I say in a sentence, but that you are an example of someone who's done this, who's gone through this process. And yeah, that's one of the reasons I wanted to speak with you today, because I wanted to show people, someone who's you mentioned being a few steps further along, and I wanted to showcase that. I've got a couple of people that I want to speak with who have taken this step or this series of steps and now are now seeing the results, and so let that be an inspiration to people who are thinking about doing the same thing.
Yeah, hopefully I can help someone. Yep.
Yeah,
it's
sure.
not easy.
It's not, but things that are worthwhile usually aren't, because if they were too easy, everyone would be doing them and there would be any challenge. Yeah. Okay, so where's the best place to find you online? I'll add all your links on the show notes page, but where's the best place for people to contact you if they want to connect with you?
The best place would probably be LinkedIn. So you can find me under my name. And Kirsta will put the links, because many of you will not be able to, to spell out my name, but it's Anja Lordanić Mustać. And you can drop me a message and let us know what you think about the episode. And please be brutally honest. I'm always looking for feedback, and I love receiving feedback, whether it be positive or negative or constructive. And I have a podcast website, which is actually just a list of the episodes I've recorded, but I'm planning on doing a sort of a new improved version of the website in a couple of months. So I'm keeping myself accountable here.
Okay, I'll
and-
ask you for that link in a couple of months and then I can add it to our page.
Yeah, and it's freelancebusinessunlocked.com.
Okay, well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast and for sharing your story with us.
Thank you, Kirsty. This was really good, and thank you for inviting me on.
Okay, and to everyone else, have a great week and never stop learning.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the English with Kirsty podcast. If you have any questions or comments, my email address is kirsty@englishwithkirsty.com, or you can go to www.englishwithkirsty.com/podcast, where you'll find information about the individual episodes.